In the autumn of 1932, a mother in Pennsylvania fed a family of 6 on about 50 cents a week, and not one of her children ever sat down to an empty plate. She did it with a pot, a sack of flour, and a kind of knowledge that has almost completely disappeared from American kitchens. By the time this is over, you will understand exactly how she did it. Number 8 on this list is the meal that cost 3 cents and showed up on tables in every state of the Union, rich county and poor. Number 5 is a dessert with no fruit in it at all. That fooled children into thinking they were eating apple pie. And number 2 is the dish that fed more families through the worst winters of the Depression than any other, made from almost nothing. These were the years when a quarter of the country was out of work, and a loaf of bread could be the difference between a good week and a hungry one. This is what a whole family ate day after day on almost no money. They didn't have much, but they knew how to make it last. Number 8, the poor man's meal. Take a few potatoes, 1 onion, and if there was any to be had, a single sliced up frankfurter, and fry the whole thing together in one pan. That was supper. It cost about 3 cents to make in 1933. It filled the stomachs of 4 people, and it turned up on tables in every corner of the country, because nearly everyone was poor in the same way at the same time. The potato did the heavy lifting. It was cheap, it was filling, and it could be bought by the sack and made to last. A family could eat some version of this 3 nights a week and be grateful there was a pan to fry it in. Number 7, milk toast. When there was no money for anything else, there was often still a little stale bread and a little milk, and that was a meal. The bread was toasted hard, set in a bowl, and warm milk was poured over it with a pinch of sugar or salt if the house had any. It was soft enough for the oldest grandparent and the youngest baby. It cost almost nothing, and it was warm. Mothers fed it to sick children and to anyone who came in cold and hungry with nothing else in the cupboard. It was not much. On a bad night in the winter of 1931, it was everything. Number 6, beans, the quiet backbone of the Depression. More families got through those years on dried beans than on any other single food. A sack of beans cost almost nothing, kept for months without spoiling, and a pot of them simmered on the back of the stove all day would feed a family for 2. They were stretched with a little salt pork when there was any, flavored with an onion, and served over bread or cornmeal to make them go further. A child of the 1930s could grow up on beans and never quite lose the memory of the smell of them cooking. They were plain. They kept people alive. Here is what was happening outside those kitchens. By 1933, almost 1 in 4 American workers had no job, and there was no safety net underneath them. In the cities, people stood in bread lines that ran around the block and waited at soup kitchens for a bowl and a piece of bread. Children went to school hungry, and teachers in some towns reported students fainting at their desks before noon. The hunger of the Depression was real hunger, the kind that does lasting harm to a growing child. The meals on this list were not quaint. They were what stood between a family and going without, and a great many families went without anyway. That is the truth the warm old photographs do not show. Now answer this before you hear the rest. Could you feed your own family for a week on a few dollars, cooking everything from scratch, wasting nothing at all? Write yes or no in the comments right now before you see how they did it. Then keep watching, because some of these meals are coming back to American tables right now for the same reason they showed up the first time. Number 5, mock apple pie. This is one of the strangest things the Depression kitchen invented. With no apples and no money for them, cooks made an apple pie with no apples in it. Crackers were broken into the crust, then covered with a syrup of sugar, water, cinnamon, and a little lemon if the house had it, and baked. The crackers softened and took on the spice, and the result tasted, against all reason, like apple pie. Children who had never seen a real apple all winter were given a slice and believed it. After a cracker company printed the recipe on its boxes in 1934, the trick spread to kitchens all over the country. It was a small act of magic in a year that had very little of it. Number 4, water pie. When even milk and eggs were too dear, there was a dessert made mostly of water. Water went into the pie shell with sugar, flour, a little butter if there was any, and a spoonful of vanilla, and in the heat of the oven, it set into something sweet and custard-like. It sounds like nothing. To a family that had not tasted dessert in months, it was a small kindness at the end of a hard supper, and it cost almost nothing to put on the table. Sweetness, in those years, was its own form of comfort, and a mother who could find a way to give her children something sweet had given them more than calories. Let me tell you about one of those mothers. In a mill town in 1932, with her husband down to 2 days of work a week, a woman bought a single cheap cut of meat on payday and made it last the entire week. The first night, it was the center of the meal. The next night, it went into a stew, stretched with potatoes and beans. After that, the bones went into a pot with water and whatever vegetables she could find, and that broth fed the family 2 more nights. By the end of the week, there was nothing left of it at all. Not a scrap, not a bone. She was not being clever for a camera. She was keeping 6 people fed on the wages of 2 days, and she did it every single week for years. That is the skill this channel is about, and it is the one we have lost most completely. Number 3, Hoover stew. In the shanty towns that the homeless built on the edges of American cities, the ones bitterly nicknamed after the president, families pooled what little they had into a single pot. Whatever was on hand went in. Macaroni, cut up hot dogs if there were any, canned tomatoes, beans, a few vegetables, all boiled together into a thin stew that could be made to feed however many people showed up. It was named in anger, not affection. But it kept people alive in the worst of the camps through the worst of the winters, and a hot bowl of it shared among neighbors was sometimes the only meal a person got that day. Number 2, cornmeal mush, the meal that fed the most. More than almost anything else, cornmeal carried families through the Depression. Boiled with water into a thick mush, it was supper, warm and filling for pennies. What was left was poured into a pan to set overnight, and in the morning, it was sliced and fried in a little grease and eaten with molasses or syrup if there was any. 1 cheap sack of cornmeal became dinner one night and breakfast the next, with nothing wasted in between. For a family with almost no money, it was the closest thing to a sure meal, and many a child of the 1930s grew up on it morning and night. Number 1, nothing wasted, ever. Underneath every meal on this list was a single rule that ran the whole Depression kitchen. Nothing was thrown away. Stale bread became milquetoast or pudding. Bones became broth. Bacon grease was saved in a tin and used to fry the next week's potatoes. Vegetable tops and peelings went into the soup pot. The last of one meal became the start of the next, and the start of the one after that. A Depression mother could look at what most kitchens throw in the bin today and see 3 more meals in it. That was not a hobby or a virtue they chose. It was how a family with almost nothing managed to eat at all. So, could you do it? Look back at what you answered at the start. A pan of potatoes and an onion. Beans on the stove all day. Bread and warm milk on the worst nights. A pie made of crackers. a stew named in anger, a sack of cornmeal stretched across a week. None of it took money the family did not have. All of it took knowledge and patience and a refusal to let anything go to waste. It is also true that behind these meals was real hunger and real harm done to children who never got enough, and the people who lived it never once pretended it was a feast. They were the hard years. They did not have much, but they knew how to make it last. And that is worth remembering. If your parents or grandparents lived through the Depression, tell me in the comments what they cooked when money was short. I want to know which of these your family still remembers. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we go back inside the hardest years America ever faced and the forgotten skills the people who survived them knew.